The chandeliers in the Kane estate gleamed like frozen stars, their golden light spilling across marble floors polished to perfection. Servants moved quietly, adjusting silver trays, preparing for the grand dinner that evening. This was the home of Alexander Kane, one of the youngest billionaires in the city admired, envied, and whispered about in equal measure. On the outside, Alexander had everything: wealth, status, and a fiancée who looked like she belonged on magazine covers. Her name was Vanessa Blackwood, elegant, glamorous, always arriving in designer dresses that turned heads. The tabloids called them the golden couple. To the world, their love seemed flawless, but Alexander knew better. Deep inside, a question gnawed at him. Did Vanessa love him, or his fortune? He had built his empire from nothing. After years of sacrifice and betrayal, trust didn't come easily to him. And lately, Vanessa's subtle remarks about yachts, mansions, and inheritances had only deepened his doubts. That's when a reckless idea took root in his mind, an idea that would test the truth of her heart. One rainy night, Alexander gathered his most trusted advisor, Mr. Reynolds, in his study. The storm outside lashed against tall windows as Alexander laid out his plan. "I want to know if Vanessa is with me for love or money," he said. Voice low but firm, Reynolds frowned. "And how did you propose to test that, sir?" Alexander leaned back in his leather chair, a flicker of mischief in his eyes. "By taking away the very thing she values most, the power, the wealth, the image. I'll tell her I've been paralyzed in an accident, wheelchair-bound, helpless." Reynolds froze. "Sir, that's extreme." Alexander's jaw tightened. "So is marrying someone who may be lying to me?" After a long silence, Reynolds finally nodded. "If this is the path you choose, then we'll make it convincing." And so, the plan was set in motion. 2 weeks later, headlines screamed across the city. Billionaire Alexander Kane suffers tragic accident, left paralyzed. Vanessa rushed to the estate, crocodile tears glistening in her eyes. The staff whispered as she entered the master suite, where Alexander sat in a wheelchair, his legs covered with a blanket, his face pale with practiced weariness. "Alex," Vanessa cried dramatically, rushing to his side. "My darling, what have they done to you?" Alexander reached for her hand, his voice weak. "The doctors, they say I may never walk again." For a moment, something flickered in Vanessa's eyes, something sharp, calculating, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a mask of concern. "Oh, Alex," she whispered, pressing his hand. "Don't worry. I'll take care of you." But Alexander, sharp-eyed even in pretense, didn't miss that fleeting moment of hesitation. While Vanessa played the role of the grieving fiancée, another figure quietly entered Alexander's world. Isabella, the young maid who had worked at the estate for less than a year. Isabella wasn't glamorous like Vanessa. Her uniforms were plain, her hands calloused from endless chores. But there was a softness in her gaze, a patience in the way she moved. On Alexander's first night in the wheelchair, when most of the staff avoided his room out of awkwardness, Isabella appeared with a tray of soup. "I thought you might be hungry, sir," she said gently, setting the bowl on the table. Alexander studied her. "Most people look at me differently now," he murmured, "like I'm broken." Isabella met his eyes. "You're still you, sir. Legs or no legs." Asterisk her words. Simple and sincere, pierced deeper than she could have known. For the first time since his charade began, Alexander felt something genuine. At first, Vanessa kept up appearances, bringing flowers, sitting by Alexander's side, sighing dramatically about how unfair life was. But as days turned into weeks, her patience began to fray. She complained about the smell of medicine in his room, about how depressing the wheelchair looked beside her gowns. One evening, when she thought Alexander was asleep, she whispered into her phone, "I can't live like this forever. He's not the man I signed up for." Alexander's chest tightened. Though he kept his eyes closed, each word confirmed his darkest fears. Meanwhile, Isabella continued her quiet care, adjusting his pillows, reading to him when he pretended to be too weak, even sneaking in warm bread from the kitchen when the hospital diet bored him. She never asked for thanks, never sought attention. She simply cared. And slowly, Alexander began to see the contrast more clearly than ever. One man sat in a wheelchair of lies, testing the love he feared was false. One woman wore diamonds and masks, her devotion cracking under pressure. And another, hidden, in plain sight, revealed love not in words, but in small, selfless acts. Alexander Kane believed he was in control of the game. But what he didn't know was that in pretending to be paralyzed, he would discover a truth more powerful than any empire: the difference between love bought with wealth and love proven in silence. The Kane estate had never felt so different. Once alive with parties, laughter, and champagne toasts, the mansion now carried a heavy silence. Curtains were drawn, guests stopped visiting, and Alexander's wheelchair sat like a symbol of tragedy in every hallway. For Alexander, this silence was part of his plan. He needed the world to believe his act of paralysis. He needed Vanessa to believe it most of all. But living a lie wasn't easy. Every morning, as Isabella wheeled him into the sunlit garden or adjusted his blanket, Alexander felt the sting of guilt. She didn't know it was a game. Neither did the rest of the staff. Only Mr. Reynolds, his advisor, carried the truth like a locked secret. And as days passed, Alexander realized something strange. He wasn't just watching Vanessa. He was watching Isabella. At first, Vanessa had played the perfect fiancée. She clung to his hand when guests visited, whispered dramatic promises, and posed for sympathetic paparazzi photos at the hospital wing. But behind closed doors, her mask slipped. One evening, she entered Alexander's study wearing a glittering gown, her phone buzzing in her hand. "Alex, do you have to keep the curtains shut? It's depressing, and the smell of medicine, it's ruining this house." Alexander, playing the part, sighed. "I'm sorry, Vanessa. I can't help it." She smiled tightly, then glanced at her phone. "Well, at least let's not cancel the yacht trip next month. We deserve a little escape. You can sit and watch the waves." Alexander studied her carefully. "Do you think I'm still the man you want to marry?" Her smile faltered just for a second. Then she leaned down, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Of course, darling. Money doesn't change." The words struck him harder than he expected. Not "you don't change. Not "I love you anyway. Only money." That same night, after Vanessa swept out to meet friends, Isabella entered quietly with a tray. "You barely touched dinner," she said softly, placing warm bread and tea on the table. Alexander gave a tired smile. "Hospital food doesn't exactly excite me." Asterisk without hesitation. Isabella pulled a napkin from her pocket and revealed a small pastry she had baked herself in the servant's kitchen. "I thought you might like something homemade." Alexander blinked in surprise. "You baked this? For me?" Isabella shrugged shyly. "For anyone who's hungry, sir." But when he tasted it, when the warmth of sugar and spice melted on his tongue, something inside him shifted. It wasn't just the pastry, it was the thought, the care, the simplicity. "Thank you, Isabella," he said quietly, more sincerely than he had spoken to anyone in weeks. She smiled faintly, adjusting his blanket. "You don't need to thank me for kindness, sir. That's just human." A few days later, Alexander wheeled himself into the hallway and paused. When he heard Vanessa on the phone in the parlor, her voice was sharp, irritated. "No, I can't leave him yet. Not until the lawyers finalize the inheritance clause, of course. I'm still going through with it once the money is secured. I don't care if he rots in that chair forever." Alexander's chest went cold. The words confirmed everything he had feared. But before rage could consume him, Isabella's voice floated from the corridor behind him. She hadn't noticed him listening. She was speaking to another maid. He must be in so much pain. Isabella whispered, "Every night I pray for him, not because he's my employer, but because no one deserves to feel so alone." Alexander's hands trembled on the wheels of his chair. To women, two truths, revealed within minutes. One's love poisoned by greed, the other's compassion pure and unasked for. Asterisk the following morning, Alexander awoke to find a small item placed on his bedside table. A simple wooden cross, carved carefully, polished with oil. Isabella entered shyly when she saw him holding it. "It was my father's," she explained softly. "He used to say it reminded him that no matter how heavy life felt, someone cared. I thought, maybe it could help you, too." Alexander swallowed hard. No one had given him something so personal, so real, in years. Not a business deal, not a luxury gift, just something from the heart. "Isabella," he whispered, his mask slipping for a moment. "You don't even know me." She looked at him steadily. "I know enough. You're human. And that's enough reason to care." As weeks passed, Vanessa's visits grew shorter. She complained about missing galas, about how people pitied her. One night, she snapped, "Alex, you don't understand how hard this is for me. I had plans, a life. Now I'm stuck with a man in a wheelchair." Alexander's stomach twisted, but he kept his act. "I never asked you to stay," he murmured. Her eyes darted nervously. "Of course you didn't. But what would people say if I abandoned you now?" Her words confirmed what he already knew. Vanessa wasn't staying for love. She was staying for image. The mansion walls heard to truths, one of greed wrapped in diamonds, and one of love hidden in quiet acts of care. As Alexander sat in his chair of lies, he realized his test was working perhaps too well, because in pretending to be broken, he had uncovered who was already broken, and who had the power to heal. But the test was far from over, and the choice it demanded would shatter lives. The Kane estate was quieter than ever. Vanessa's visits had dwindled to quick appearances, often cut short by phone calls and social events. She would sweep into Alexander's room in glittering gowns, sigh dramatically, and then vanish as quickly as she came. But Isabella was always there. Morning and night. She was the steady presence by his side, adjusting his blankets, bringing his meals, reading him books, even humming softly while dusting the shelves. For Alexander, who had grown up surrounded by opportunists, her quiet devotion was both strange and disarming. One evening, a violent storm swept across the city. Thunder rattled the windows, lightning split the sky, and the estate's power flickered before plunging into darkness. The staff scrambled with candles, but most retreated to their quarters, waiting out the storm. In his room, Alexander sat alone in the flickering candlelight, listening to the rain lash the glass. He hadn't realized how helpless he felt until he needed someone to close the window that had blown open. Before he could call out, Isabella rushed in, soaked from the rain. She hurried to the window, wrestled it shut, and turned back, hair clinging to her face. "You'll catch a chill," she scolded gently, grabbing a towel to wipe his arms where the rain had reached. Alexander's throat tightened. No one had spoken to him like that in years, without fear, without calculation. Just care. He murmured, almost to himself, "Why do you do this for me?" Isabella paused, looking into his eyes. "Because everyone deserves to feel cared for, sir, even you." Days later, Alexander fell into his role, to deeply pretending weakness so convincingly that his body truly gave way. A fever gripped him, and for the first time, his charade blurred with real vulnerability. Vanessa visited once, wrinkling her nose at the sight of medicine bottles. "I'll send a nurse. I can't handle this." But Isabella never left his side. She placed cool cloths on his forehead, fed him broth spoon by spoon, whispered encouragement through his feverish nights. At one point, when he drifted in and out of sleep, he heard her voice softly praying, "Please, let him be all right. Not because he's rich, not because he's my employer, but because no one else is here for him." A tear slipped from his eye, unseen in the dark. When his fever broke, Alexander insisted Isabella wheel him into the garden for fresh air. The roses were in bloom, their fragrance heavy after the storm. Sitting there, he felt strangely vulnerable, not as a billionaire, but as a man seen through by someone who expected nothing in return. "Isabella," he said quietly, "what would you do if everything I had was gone? The money, the house, the name?" She frowned, puzzled. "Why would you ask that? Just answer," he pressed. She thought for a long moment, then said softly, "I'd still treat you the same. Because kindness shouldn't depend on what someone has." Her words pierced him deeper than he admitted. He looked away, hiding the guilt gnawing at him. She doesn't even know I've been lying all along. Meanwhile, Vanessa's mask cracked further. One night, she argued with Mr. Reynolds in the hallway, not realizing Alexander could hear through the door. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "I didn't sign up to be a caretaker. I want a husband who can stand beside me, not a burden in a chair." Reynolds replied stiffly, "Miss Blackwood, your words will reach his ears sooner or later. Are you prepared for that?" Her voice turned cold. "If he thinks I'll waste my life on this tragedy, he's a fool. I'm only staying until the will is finalized." Alexander sat frozen, his fists clenched under the blanket. He had suspected, but hearing it aloud cut sharper than any knife. And yet, at the same time, he could hear Isabella's soft humming, drifting from the kitchen downstairs as she baked bread for him. The contrast was undeniable. One morning, Isabella shyly approached with a small package wrapped in cloth. "I know it isn't much," she said, placing it on his lap, "but I wanted you to have this." Inside was a hand-knit scarf, uneven in places, but warm. She blushed as she explained, "I made it myself, for the cold evenings in the garden." Alexander ran his fingers over the rough stitches, his chest aching. No diamond Vanessa had ever given him had meant half as much as this imperfect, handmade gift. He whispered, "No one's ever given me something so real." Isabella smiled, tucking the scarf gently around his shoulders. "Sometimes it's the simple things that keep us warm." The billionaire's world was built on wealth, power, and appearances. But as he sat wrapped in a maid's imperfect scarf, Alexander Kane felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. While his fiancée's love cracked under the weight of his lie, the maid's devotion only grew stronger. And soon, the test he thought he controlled would spiral into a truth far greater than he ever imagined. Because love cannot be measured by wealth, but by sacrifice. The Kane estate glittered less these days. Chandeliers still shone, but the warmth was gone. Guests rarely visited. Parties had vanished, and Vanessa's laughter echoed through the mansion only when she was on the phone with friends. Alexander, still acting paralyzed, observed everything with quiet intensity. Each moment revealed more of Vanessa's truth and more of Isabella's. He had set this plan in motion to test love, but the answers were beginning to cut deeper than he'd prepared for. One evening, Vanessa swept into Alexander's study, her perfume sharp, her gown shimmering with sequins. She had barely looked at him before saying, "Alex, I'm going to Paris for Fashion Week. You'll manage, won't you?" Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Manage? You mean sit here alone while you walk red carpets?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. You don't need me here. Isabella's always hovering anyway. She seems to enjoy playing nurse." The bitterness in her tone was unmistakable. Alexander asked quietly, "Would you stay if I asked you to?" Her pause was brief, but enough. "I'll call you every day," she said with a hollow smile. And just like that, she was gone. Later that night, Isabella entered with warm soup. Seeing the untouched plate from dinner, she frowned. "You didn't eat again." Alexander sighed. "Wasn't hungry. She sat beside him, patient but firm. "You need strength, sir. please. For me just a few bites." Her gentle persistence made him chuckle despite himself. "You sound like a nurse, or maybe just someone who cares," she replied softly. He met her eyes, and for a dangerous moment, the lines of his plan blurred. She didn't know this was a lie, and yet her kindness was the only thing keeping him steady. A week later, Vanessa returned from Paris. Furious, headlines had splashed across tabloids. Billionaire's fiancée seen partying abroad while he suffers at home. She stormed into the estate, heels clattering, eyes blazing. "Do you know what this has done to my reputation? People think I abandoned you." Alexander kept his voice weak, his act steady. "Maybe because you did." Her face hardened. "Don't you dare accuse me. Do you think I want this life? You trapped me in it the moment you got into that wheelchair." Silence fell heavy. From the corner of the room, Isabella froze mid-step, a tray in her hands. She had heard everything. Vanessa, too enraged to notice Isabella, kept going. "You're pathetic now, Alex. A man who can't walk, can't stand, can't even keep my attention. I'm only here until I get what's owed to me, then I'm gone." The words hung like poison in the air. Isabella gasped softly, unable to contain it. Vanessa spun, eyes narrowing. "And you, Maid, what are you staring at?" Isabella lowered her gaze. "Nothing, ma'am." But Alexander had seen enough. The test had gone far enough. Vanessa. Alexander said suddenly, his voice stronger than she'd ever heard it since the accident. She blinked. What do you mean?" Slowly, deliberately, Alexander rose from the wheelchair. His legs straightened, his posture tall and unyielding. The room fell silent. Vanessa's eyes widened in horror. "Why you? You can walk." "Yes," Alexander said coldly. "I could walk this whole time. This," he gestured to the chair, "was a test." Vanessa's face turned pale. A test? "To see if you loved me," he said. His voice was sharp, every word like a blade. "To see if you cared for me beyond the money, the image, the wealth, and tonight." I got my answer. She staggered back, then rushed forward, grabbing his arm. "No, Alex, wait, I didn't mean those things. I was angry. I was scared. You can't end us over this. I do love you." But her tears came too quickly, too perfectly rehearsed. The study was still vibrating with the echoes of Alexander's revelation. Vanessa's sharp breaths, Isabella's trembling silence, and Alexander's steady stance filled the space where lies had just collapsed. Vanessa was the first to speak, her voice breaking between anger and desperation. "Alex, you can't do this to me. Do you know how I'll look in society? A woman who abandoned her billionaire fiancé? They'll tear me apart." Alexander's gaze was cold. "Vanessa, you were never here for me. You were here for my fortune. And when you thought I had lost my power, you showed me exactly what I needed to see." Her face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this, Alex Kane. No one humiliates me," and walks away. She stormed out, heels echoing down the marble halls, her fury trailing behind her like smoke. The door slammed. Silence returned. Isabella set the tray down with trembling hands. Her face was pale, her eyes clouded with hurt. "You Lied, she whispered. To her, to me, to everyone. Alexander's heart clenched. Isabella, please let me explain. She shook her head. All those nights I prayed for you, worried for you, and you weren't even suffering. Do you know what that feels like? To pour your heart into someone's pain, only to find out it was an illusion. Her words hit harder than Vanessa's betrayal ever had. For the first time in years, Alexander felt truly ashamed. He stepped closer, his voice softer. It wasn't about mocking your kindness. It was about finding the truth. And in that process, I found you. I saw how genuine, how selfless you are. That wasn't part of the plan. That was the gift I never expected. For the next week, Isabella avoided him. She did her duties. But her warmth was gone. No more soft humming. No more quiet prayers. She was polite, professional, but distant. Alexander felt the emptiness keenly. The mansion seemed colder without her presence. Finally, unable to bear it, he went to the servants' quarters, something he had never done before. He found Isabella, folding laundry, her hands moving mechanically. Isabella, he said softly, look at me. She hesitated, then lifted her eyes. I know I broke your trust, Alexander said, but I swear, what I feel for you now is real. You showed me love when I was at my lowest, or what you thought was my lowest. You gave me warmth. No money could buy. And I can't let you walk away thinking it was all a lie. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she blinked them back. How do I know you're not just saying this because you're lonely? He stepped forward, pulling something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a diamond ring. It was the scarf she had whereupon for him, folded carefully. Because this, he said, voice thick, means more to me than any diamond Vanessa ever wore. This is love, and I want to spend the rest of my life earning yours. Slowly, Isabella's defenses softened. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the humility he had never shown before. Alexander, she whispered, I don't need your wealth. I never did. I just need to know you're being honest with me, with yourself. He took her hands gently. Then I promise you no more lies. From now on, the only truth I want to live is the one we build together. Meanwhile, Vanessa's threats against Alexander backfired. Gossip columns revealed her Paris escapades. Photos of her with other men surfaced, and her carefully crafted social image crumbled. She tried to spin the story, painting herself as the victim, but no one bought it. Invitations stopped coming, friends vanished, and she was left with nothing but the hollow shell of the world she once worshipped. She had gambled on greed and lost everything. Months later, the Kane estate looked different. Laughter had returned, not from glittering parties, but from genuine warmth. Isabella, now no longer a maid, walked beside Alexander not as an employee, but as his partner. The staff respected her, the community admired her, and the tabloids now called her the maid who stole the billionaire's heart. At a press conference, Alexander stood proudly, Isabella by his side. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Kane, is it true your fiancée left you after your accident? He smiled faintly. No, it's true she left me after I stood up again. Because real love doesn't crumble when life gets hard. It grows stronger. He turned to Isabella, his voice softening. And I found that love where I least expected it. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment. Late one evening, Alexander sat with Isabella in the garden. The roses were in bloom again, their fragrance thick in the night air. He leaned back, wrapping the scarf she had whereupon around his shoulders. Funny, he said quietly, I once thought I needed to test love with lies. But in the end, love tested me with truth. Isabella smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. And you passed. Once, a billionaire pretended to be paralyzed to test the love of his fiancée. He discovered greed, betrayal, and masks that shattered under pressure. But he also discovered something far greater: love that didn't need wealth, didn't need status, didn't need proof. Because true love is not proven by grand gestures, but by small acts of care when no one is watching. And sometimes, the one who seems invisible, the maid in the corner, the humble soul, turns out to be the heart we were searching for all along. So, what do you think? Was Alexander wrong to test Vanessa this way? Or was it the only way to uncover the truth? Tell us in the comments below. Don't forget to like this story if it inspired you. Share it with someone who believes in true love. And subscribe for more cinematic stories with shocking twists and powerful morals. Alexander shook his head. Love doesn't crumble under pressure. Yours did. Vanessa's mask shattered. Rage replaced desperation. You'll regret this. After everything I've given up for you. He cut her off. What you gave up was nothing. What you tried to take was everything. Isabella stood frozen, the tray trembling in her hands. You were never paralyzed. Alexander turned to her, guilt shadowing his face. No, I wasn't. I had to know the truth about Vanessa. Her eyes widened with hurt. So, all this time, every moment, every prayer, I thought you were suffering. And it was a game. Her voice cracked on the last word, and Alexander's chest tightened. No, Isabel, it wasn't a game. It was my life, and you were the only part of it that was real. The golden fiancée's mask had shattered, her greed spilling into the open. The billionaire's lie had been exposed, his wheelchair test revealed. And the maid, the one who had shown the truest love, now stood between betrayal and truth, unsure if her heart could forgive the deception. Because sometimes the greatest tests don't reveal others, they reveal ourselves.